Alrighty, hey everybody, good evening, good evening. Welcome again to the Milwaukie Leadership Academy. Thank you all so much for being here. We are here tonight to hear from Luke Strait, who is our Chief of Police, and also Steve Adams, who is our City Engineer. We're going to start off hearing from the Police Department, and we are going to, after our break, hear from Engineering. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And specifically, I want to just share the PowerPoint window. Let's do it. Love that. All right. And let's go to our slideshow. Play it from the beginning. And as always, I have to ask the question, we are showing big screen, little screen. Which one? Big screen.
Big screen.
Big screen, it worked. All right. Milwaukie Leadership Academy, Session 6, Police and Engineering. Again, police first, engineering afterwards. As always, we're going to wrap up with final thoughts. Oh, but before we do that, our agreements. So we will show respect and empathy for each other and guests. We will seek to be actively involved in the class. We will allow the facilitators to be responsible for keeping the class on time and on track. Thanks, Stefan, as always, for that one. And then we will seek to make Milwaukee a flourishing city that is entirely equitable, delightfully livable, and completely sustainable. All right, next slide. Housekeeping. So really the only city event that is immediately out on the calendar is the Earth Day Restoration event, which is coming up on April 23rd. And on April 23rd, there is going to be an opportunity to come out and join the city to work on some habitat restoration in, I want to say, Willow Creek. We'll confirm the name of that. But also, though, actually, it occurs to me we have a shred day coming up as well through the Milwaukee Police Department. Chief, I'm sorry, I don't have that here in front of me. Do you know that date off the top of your head? Otherwise, I can pull it.
I can certainly find it, but I don't have it right off the top of my head.
Let me pull that up for us, and we'll get that before we get too far into the night. Hybrid MLA is my one other piece, and that is that with the state of Oregon easing its COVID-19 restrictions, we are going to have an opportunity. It's been now 2 years since we were able to, but we are going to actually have, it looks like, an opportunity to do a hybrid class on April 23rd. So I will be sending out more information about that. And if you would like to remain online, it's a hybrid class, so you have every opportunity to do that. But for folks who would like to join us in person, April 23rd, it looks like we will be able to do that. There will be food provided. What type of food, whether for sure we're meeting in the library or at City Hall, these are open questions, but more information on that to come. Before we jump into tonight's presentation, does anybody have any other community updates, any other community business for the good of the order? Alrighty. So with that, we are going to go right on ahead to our presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, Chief of Police Luke Strait.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dan. I'm not sure I know a few of you there, but not everyone. So my name is Luke Strait. I've been with the city of Milwaukee for about 27 years. And for the past 3 years, I've been in this position as the chief of police. Briefly, some of the positions I held along the way, obviously started out as a police officer. I worked in detectives. I worked on a drug and gang task force that was federal. I was also a patrol sergeant and a captain before taking this position. It's kind of a pleasure and honor to talk with you folks tonight and just share a little bit about the police department. And I'm definitely open to questions, so you can feel free to interrupt me as we go or scribble a note and we can circle back to it. I put some slides together, but it's just kind of the foundation for some stuff that we can talk through. You can go ahead and next slide, Dan, unless I have the ability to do that.
I don't think you do because I'm sharing, but
Okay.
There we go. Oh, there we go. It's all gotcha.
So for people that don't know, I report to the city manager. I am hired by the city manager, and this is a at-will position. So if you've heard the term that, the chief of police works at the pleasure of the city manager, that's kind of what we're talking about here. It's an at-will position. I was hired through a competitive recruitment process that was both internal and external. And I work until the city doesn't really think I'm the right person for the job. And that's kind of how that works. Not often the community is not super clear on how that works, but I definitely have a boss, and I'm not the top of the food chain in the city for sure. Next slide. This is just an overall department photo. The Milwaukee Police Department is an accredited agency. That is optional and voluntary. The Oregon Accreditation Alliance is who we're accredited through. So that's an external third party that basically does checks for best practices. They inspect your policies and procedures and how you do business. And that happens on a regular basis. Some agencies go out of their way to advertise that. We don't necessarily put it on our cars and on our building, but we are very proud that we're accredited. And not all agencies in the state are. Next slide. This is an organization chart if you're not familiar with our police department. There's two captains. One is an administrative captain who's responsible for records and training and property and evidence. The other one is an operations captain. We then have 6 patrol sergeants, 1 detective sergeant, a property and evidence tech. Our records division has a supervisor and 2 record specialists. And some specialty assignments also include folks that focus on traffic enforcement, a K-9 handler, and we have people that work on a crisis negotiation team, as well as the interagency SWAT team. Next slide. This kind of breaks that down with just a different visual. In any police department, patrol really is the backbone of the organization. Our ability to respond to both emergency and non-emergency calls is the first and most critical aspect of our department. We obviously operate 24/7. We always have a supervisor working any time of the day or night. A sergeant runs a shift, and the lowest we ever go in staffing, which we refer to as minimum staffing, is 2 officers and 1 sergeant any time of the day or night. Now, depending on the day of week and time of day, we could often have twice that many people around. And during the day, we also have a number of administrative positions and detectives. So that staffing could triple during the daytime, but there could be hours of the day or night when we're at minimum staffing, which is 3 people. That's enough for us to get the job done, but there's absolutely no extra. And it's fairly common for us to call for help from agencies that work around us because 1 good call can tie up more than 3 people. But again, that just kind of shows the basic breakdown of the department. Next slide, Dan.
Come on now. Oh, there we go.
Our detective division has 1 detective sergeant. That person is promoted from the patrol sergeant ranks. And then there are 4 detectives. One of those detectives specializes in computer and forensic crimes. That detective tends to be a long-term position because of the amount of training and education that goes into it. And the other 3 detectives are general assignment. One of those is on a shorter rotation than others. And when our staffing gets low, we can pull one of those detectives back to the patrol to, again, kind of make our bottom line with our patrol staffing and the need to just handle calls for service. There tends to be an ebb and flow in staffing. When we get to full staffing, we usually aren't there very long just because there's some natural attrition, and the process to hire and train people has gotten exponentially more difficult the last couple of years. For example, if we hire someone right now, the soonest we could possibly get them into the police academy is September, and that's a 16-week academy. And that's if we hired them right now, that's the soonest we could possibly get them in. That doesn't even mean we would get them in September. So that has been unique to the past couple of years with the combination of the impacts of COVID and then the impacts to staffing that the challenges of this profession have had, not just in our agency, but throughout the state of Oregon and the entire country. If you follow it, everyone's dealing with those same staffing struggles. So we have a process open right now for entry-level people and for lateral police officers. But our detectives stay very busy. And a lot of that the public does not hear about. But they're worked very hard and on some incredibly complex cases. Although unpleasant to talk about 4 or 5 years ago, we had a homicide on 42nd, and we have detectives that are still working that case. It's resulted in at least 5 indictments at both the state and federal level. And the scope of that case is massive. We don't generally talk a lot about that externally with the public. Every once in a while, a newspaper article goes out on it, but we have a fantastic team of people up there and they do a great job for us. Next slide. The major crimes team, if you are a detective in our agency, you're also part of the Clackamas County Interagency Major Crimes Team. That team focuses on homicides and also on officer-involved shootings. So if we have either one of those, the way this county works is we use an interagency team to work those, and then they also assess the expertise and the skill and experience of everybody that's eligible to be on that team, so that we're sure we're putting the very best people that the county has to offer. And also so that if we have an officer-involved shooting in our city, that some other agency and entity will be lead on that investigation. So it would be coordinated by the Clackamas County District Attorney's Office. They have a person there who is a civilian, and he's the major crimes team coordinator. And then the lead detective and the vast majority of the detectives would be from agencies other than the Milwaukee Police Department. But that team does focus on homicides and officer-involved shootings. Next slide. This slide just talks a little bit about some of the challenges. Some of those are historical and they've always been there, and some of them are either a little bit newer or a little bit more prominent lately. Mental health crisis, I'm sure you all follow that and see some of the impacts of that in the news. Rough numbers, I would say probably 20% of our calls, and it could easily be double that, have either a component of mental health crisis or addiction involved in them. Homelessness has, I know it's not news to anyone here today, has been a real challenge. And the closer you are to big cities, typically the more of a challenge it is. We're working hard to find better solutions for that and the best ways to manage it. And that involves partnering with a lot of other social service providers and looking at just new and innovative ways for cities like ours to manage this issue. Equity in policing. What that means to me and what I hope it means to other people is that we just strive to be fair and impartial in how we do our job, and also to consider the way how we deliver services can impact people and can impact our community. It's easy to say that, but we don't take that lightly. I do see the impact that we have on people, at times both positive and negative. We work to minimize the negative impact to the extent that we can, and to really evaluate honestly how we deliver those services, and at times new and innovative ways to improve how we deliver those. Transparency, we work hard to share data and to collect data. For an agency our size, we don't have a lot of extra positions, and that means that it's usually people that have a very busy schedule trying to find time to pull data, as opposed to having analysts and people that just focus on that, and that is their job. But we've focused a lot more on that in the last couple of years, because obviously people want to know more about that, and it can be difficult to answer questions without good, clear data. The data is what it is, and the more work we put into gathering it, sometimes the more we learn about our agency and the profession as well. Use of force management has been very challenging always, and certainly has been the focus of a lot of attention the last couple of years, some of which is very appropriate. And community engagement. We work hard to make connections with our community, and this is one way that we can do that. Often it means we attach ourselves to someone else's event. Obviously, the police department didn't put this program on, but we're really happy to be here today and get a chance to talk to you, and then also listen to any questions or concerns. So we appreciate that. And we've all worked through COVID together. So next slide, Dan. Keep going. And you can just go through that whole list there. These can sound like buzzwords saying all the right things, but these are the realities of what's important. This isn't a comprehensive list, but it is a list of the things that we work hard at, and they are a constant part of our conversation and our work every day. This job is challenging. I'm 99% of the time, I'm not out there handling calls anymore, but we always have people that are. And I can listen to the radio every day, and it's a complicated job. The things that we focus on is professionalism and working to be professional with people, even when it's really challenging. Work ethic, community engagement, as I mentioned, we're finding new ways to connect with the community and opportunities to listen more than talk. Today, I am here to talk a little bit, but hopefully there will be time for questions. And if not today, then I'm easy to find always. We want our people to always be explaining our profession. There can be a lot of confusion about what we do, how we do it, and why we do it that way. So while we listen, we always want to be educating people to kind of clear up some of those misconceptions and confusions. We want our folks to strive to be great at this job. It's not something you're perfect at when you're hired or even now today. And I would hope that all of us want to be better tomorrow than we were yesterday, and that we're continuing to work at it and learn and grow. And accepting responsibility for our mistakes. Because this is complicated, there will always be mistakes. As hard as we work to minimize them and space them out, they occur. And we need to accept responsibility for them and kind of analyze them to see what happened and why and what we learned from them. And then just recognizing public trust can take years to develop, and we can lose it in an instant. Next slide. I put some of this stuff in here because it is important, and it's something we talk about internally with our folks, and it's at least worth mentioning externally. Just the fact that although the issues that we talk, the most current issues around law enforcement can at times seem new, in many ways they're not. These things have been discussed for 100 years or more in different ways. And this gentleman here, if you're not familiar with him, is known as the father of modern policing, and it's pretty impressive to look at the principles that he came up with a very long time ago and how relevant they are to the issues we discussed today. Next slide. These are some things we talk about internally. The better job we can do at preventing crime, the less we have to focus on the reactive aspects of police work, which is catching criminals and ensuring they're held accountable, and all the mess that can come along with that. When people have committed crime and they're trying to escape or get away, that quickly gets messy. And we should be working together closely with the community to prevent as much of that as possible, so that we don't have to get involved in as much of the messy aspects and reactive aspects of police work. They will always be there, but the more of that we can prevent, the better for you and for me. Earning public support, that really is critical, and we learn every day that we do that through community engagement, through transparency, through education, through listening, and hearing people's experiences, and being open to change and looking for innovative new ways to do this job. And then also respecting community principles. It's been very apparent to me that every police department is its own entity, and every community is as well. The culture of the community is something we have to both respect and find ways to support. So the principles that are important to the residents of the city of Milwaukee should be equally as important to me, and I should try to find ways to support those. And that's how we work well together, obviously. And the city of Milwaukee is different than the city of Molalla or the city of Lake Oswego. And each one of those police departments are also unique, and they have their own history, strengths, and weaknesses. Next slide, Dan. This is another of Peel's principles that just talks about how to manage and prevent and manage the use of force. To only use that when the exercise of persuasion, advice, and warning is found to be insufficient to obtain public cooperation to an extent necessary to secure observance of law or to restore order, and to use only the minimum degree of physical force which is necessary on any particular occasion for achieving a police objective. It's just a good broad overview of how we should be trying to manage use of force that was relevant 100 years ago, and it's still very relevant today. Next slide. This is a little bit of data. I don't bombard you with data in this, and it is a couple years old. We work the first quarter of the year to collect and analyze our data for the past year. The data during COVID has been unique, very unusual, and we have not yet finished just because it's been a busy couple months compiling our data from this last year. But this still gives a very good snapshot of basic data. In 2019, we had 27,000 different calls and contacts. That resulted in 5,000 separate police reports. And when I say separate police reports, one police report could have 30 different reports attached to it, but that's 5,000 separate case numbers essentially. During that year, we made 700 arrests. And for those 700 arrests, we use or threatened to use force 54 times. We track both the threatened use of force, which could be if someone is threatening to fight, an officer could direct them to get on the ground or say that they're going to use their taser. That would be a threatened use of force. And if the person complies, then no force is actually used. We do track both the threatened use of force as well as the actual use of force. So that's a quick snapshot of probably an average year where the last 2 years, the data would be significantly different and unusual when compared to the last decade. Next slide. This is one more look at our use of force. When we look and analyze our use of force, we certainly look at injuries. Most of our use of force is very minor. It can be some pushing and shoving and wrestling for control. And the majority of that doesn't result in any actual injury, but we do track minor injury and major injury. Major injury, we would be talking about some kind of serious hospitalization. And in this particular year, I know we had 2 injuries, which we consider particularly significant. One of those was a crash with a stolen vehicle that was out committing crimes, and the driver was injured during the crash. So that just gives you another glimpse of some of our data related to one of our average years. Next slide, Dan. Some different kinds of community engagement that we do that we'll talk about, but new stuff this past year or two has included our BIPOC listening sessions and our BIPOC police policy and contract review. That was new for the city of Milwaukee and the Milwaukee Police Department. It's also, in my experience, fairly unusual for law enforcement in this area. And during the course of that, we did listening sessions where we met with community members and just listened to their experiences with police, both here in town as well as in other areas. And then we also put a group together who spent months reviewing 17 different police policies, as well as our police contract, and recommending changes to those. And we've only just recently completely finished that process. That was a very long process. And community members played a big role in that, where for months, they were meeting for hours at a time with us in the evening and going over policies. For those 17 policies, the average policy could be 5 or 7 pages long, and they get very complicated. So that was in-depth work. We do have a link there that goes to our equity and policing page. We don't try to make that too big, but we try to put the basic information there that people may be interested in. If they're wondering what kind of an organization we have and what we're doing around equity work in policing. Next slide. This is a definition that we use both internally and externally to help people understand how we're processing and managing this issue. The definition that I've mostly used and adopted for Equity Lens is a process for analyzing the impact of the design and implementation of policies, programs, and services on underserved or marginalized individuals or group to identify and potentially eliminate barriers. And then the definition for marginalized groups is groups that experience unequal representation because of unequal power relationships. Neither of those definitions I wouldn't claim are perfect, but they're the ones that make the most sense to me when I think about the profession I'm in, and then also talk through issues with our people. Next slide. Some other people that have worked closely with us in equity work related to police work is our equity manager, who I'm assuming you've had a chance to meet, John Hennington, who works at City Hall. We talked about our listening sessions and our police policy and contract review. We go through a process more regularly of trying to apply an equity lens to whether it's policies or whether it's to a specific call or training or recruitment. And I'm not claiming at any point in this presentation we're perfect at any of this. It's ongoing work, and some of it is stuff that we haven't worked as intentionally on in the past. But we're working hard at it, and I generally feel good about where we're at. Next slide. Coffee with a Cop is one of those community engagement things you might be familiar with, and that's just simply where we set a date and do at least a little bit of advertisement saying we're going to be at a specific location at a specific time, just there to sip on some coffee and talk with anybody that shows up. And we may have some swag or handouts, and be prepared to have just discussions and answer questions. We try to do that a few times a year. Sometimes businesses will specifically reach out to us and just tell us they scheduled it. And then we hustle to make sure we can show up for them. Starbucks is a business that is particularly good at that. They tend to just schedule those and then tell us, hey, we scheduled this and can you make it work? And we usually do. We've also done similar events at other shops downtown, such as the Painted Lady. We've done events like Craft with a Cop at our downtown businesses and Chocolate with a Cop. They're just opportunities for us to be at a certain specific place and time, available to talk to folks, get to know them, and maybe answer some questions. Next slide. Shop with a Cop is another one of those. We get donations annually that are generated through the Clackamas County Peace Officers Benevolent Foundation, some fundraisers that they do. We then take that money and solicit applications from families who've maybe had bad experiences with law enforcement or the criminal justice system. And they then show up, and we pair them up with police officers and help them do some Christmas shopping for themselves and their family. Next slide. Some other local partnerships that you may not be familiar with. We obviously share resources throughout the county, and it's common for us to send resources. For example, when Malala started doing evacuations, we send a lot of people and resources out there to immediately help them on a moment's notice. And we get the same response from other agencies when we need help. Those are mutual aid agreements. A partner that we have in this is our law enforcement assisted diversion. That's a pre-arrest diversion program that's designed to divert people who otherwise could be charged with low-level crimes, divert them away from the criminal justice system, and plug them into social services that may be able to solve those problems in other ways. Project Hope is a fantastic partner. They focus on individuals struggling with addiction. Our officers, if they come in contact with folks who are struggling with addiction, and they seem like they may be receptive to help, they can send a little 5-minute email to Project Hope staff, and that initiates a system that involves peer mentors with lived experience related to addiction, and a community paramedic who will do follow-up and try and make contact with that person and help them get plugged into social services. They'll then circle back and update the officers that made the referral and let us know if that was successful or not. And they generally have the mentality that it may take a half a dozen times before someone successfully actually engages in those services. And they want to just keep at it. Those are people that have dedicated their lives to helping folks struggling with addiction. There's an opioid task force. We've played a key role in that since it evolved in Clackamas County to include holding a chair position for the last 2 years, along with one of the Clackamas County judges. That is ongoing work that you may hear more about in the future. Opioids and overdoses have been, there's some real frightening data about that, especially the last couple of years. So that's important work. And I have to thank Councillor Wilda Parks, former Councillor Parks. She was kind of a leader on that front and continues to be a real passionate advocate for addiction and recovery. Mobile command post, there's a picture of that bus there that's used on major incidents. We're a part of an interagency SWAT team that deals with really complicated and messy tactical situations. The goal of that team is to resolve situations that seem impossible safely. And that's what those people sign up for. They actually do a fantastic job because they literally are going out on things that sound like they should be pretty much impossible to resolve safely, and often they do. We do have one canine, and it's pictured there. Our new handler is Officer David McVeigh, and the dog's name is Benz. They're just fresh out of training, and they are deployed out on the road. Next slide. Our dispatch center, if folks don't know it, our dispatch services are provided by LOCOM, is what it's called, Lake Oswego Communication Center. We contract for services with them. They also dispatch for the Lake Oswego city and community and West Lynn. If you're elsewhere in the county, you would be dispatched by a different dispatch organization called CCOM. CCOM covers a lot more area and a lot more people, and their call volume is a lot higher. And the number of people they have competing for radio time is higher, and competing for 911 lines is higher. So you get fantastic service in the 3 cities I mentioned, Milwaukee, Lake Oswego, and West Lynn. If you dial 911 or the non-emergency line, it's going to be answered by a real person in less than a minute, like high 90% of the time, regardless of which line you call in on. The non-emergency line and the 911 line both go to the same center. And that's unique here in the city of Milwaukee. If you're elsewhere in the county, you could bounce around a phone tree and be put on hold before you ever talk to a person. That could take minutes. If you're in Multnomah County, that could take a very long time, like well past a few minutes. You could be on hold for an hour in Multnomah County, unfortunately. Our medical services are dispatched out of CCOM, who dispatches fire and ambulance services. And that final tidbit, our average response time from the time the phone rings in LOCOM to the time we arrive on scene for priority calls was about 4.5 minutes the last time we did that data. Next slide. There we go. Our school resource officer, we have one school resource officer. He spends the majority of his time at Milwaukee High School and tries to just help bridge the gap there and meet the needs of, obviously a school is a small community or a small city all by itself, and they tend to be very busy. They have a lot of issues that pop up. So he's there to serve as that immediate resource with no delay and some consistency in who they're dealing with. And that's someone that applies for that position, and they want to specifically kind of help out in that school environment. He also helps out with all the other schools in the city, but he's dedicated more so to Milwaukee High School. Next slide. I'm trying to bang through this quick enough that we have time for questions, and also that I don't steal Steve's time from him. But folks can interrupt me anytime or jot a note if you have a question. The Special Olympics, Tippecop, Torch Run, and Polar Plunge, those are all different examples of combinations of fundraisers for Special Olympics and community engagement opportunities. And they're fun events for our people to get involved in, to kind of break up the cycle and the routine of what we typically do. Next slide. Our cadet program that focuses on people from the age of 16 to 21. They can be and often are people that are interested in the profession, but they don't have to be interested in doing it long term. They do get training. They go through a Cadet Academy, and we have one of those going on now, where every Saturday they spend all day in training, and it's training very similar to what full-time police officers go through. There's just a lot less of it, and they're volunteers. And we then use them for community functions as often as possible around town. And so they get essentially training in what it would be like to be a police officer in exchange for some volunteer time and helping our city out in community events and working closely with our community. And it is common for us to hire people out of that pool of individuals. Often they've had 3 or 4 years to learn things about the profession, and also for us to kind of shape who they would be as a police officer. So at any given time, we could have 30 or 40% of our department that started out in that cadet program. Next slide. And that's kind of, I think I'm close to on time. That's kind of the basic stuff that I put together. And that's just really intended to be a foundation, a quick overview of who we are and some things that are important to us. But I'd love to answer any questions that might have come up.
Great presentation, Chief. I've got questions for you, but I'd rather hear from class members first. Okay, I'll go ahead and jump in there then.
Stefan, I think we do have one hand up.
Okay.
Emily?
Yeah, sorry, I was just trying not to jump in too fast too, but I was curious, one of the first things that you talked about was about the accreditation process of the agency, and I just was curious if you could tell me a little bit more about like how that works, and were there different, you mentioned the name of the organization that you got your accreditation through, which made me wonder if there are others that you could get accredited through, and I don't know, I just was curious about that piece a little bit.
Yeah, I believe there are at least 2 different options to get accredited. We're accredited through Oregon. So it's an institution that's focused on Oregon. There is a federal accreditation process as well. Law enforcement varies drastically as you go across the country. It can be almost shocking, even for me, how different. You can imagine the difference if we go to remote parts of the state, and that becomes even drastically more so as you leave the state and travel across the country. And you also end up in different sort of court jurisdictions, and that also influences how they do business. But the Oregon Accreditation Alliance is who we go through. We were accredited before I moved into these management positions. It's hardest the first time you do it. And you have to have someone, some agencies have someone where that's a part of their job. We do have someone where that is a part of their job description to manage that accreditation process. But like, for example, our administrative assistant here is beginning that process now. And there's basically a long list of questions and things that you have to provide and show proof of, and then also site visits by people. So you're just inviting a third party in to analyze your business. And once you open that door, they have a list of questions, and they're essentially going to score you. And you'll either become accredited or you'll struggle and work at it for a few years to try and get there. It can involve how you set up your cars, safety equipment. It can involve policies like how you report use of force. So it gets fairly in depth into the organization, and so it would be a state standard for best practice within law enforcement. And that doesn't mean we're perfect, but it does mean we have invited a impartial third party in to analyze how we're doing business and let us know if there's areas we need to tighten up. There's another company that we use that's optional. CIS, who handles city and county insurance. They do a similar program, only it's not a formal accreditation. But if you ask them to, they will come in and evaluate and analyze your business and then give you feedback. We have also done that as well in the last couple of years. I could find a link to the Oregon Accreditation Alliance and copy that into the chat. And they would probably talk a little bit more about that process on a website, I assume.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for answering my question.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead and jump in here. You answered one of my questions in your presentation, and that was, what do you tell a high school student who thinks they might be interested in law enforcement? And I think it's probably the cadet system. But my other question, and this might put you on the spot a little bit, but I've often wondered, given that we sometimes end up with trains dividing our city, sometimes even in a couple different directions, is there any conscious effort to make sure that if you're at minimal staffing, that you have at least one officer on each side of the train tracks?
So to answer both questions, yeah, the cadet program is one of the main tools we use, and Officer Mark Inman is also someone that manages our cadet program. So that's not by mistake that he's also a school resource officer. He's kind of a little bit more passionate about mentoring kids and encouraging them to get involved. And certainly they have a lot of questions about what the profession entails, and we can help answer those questions and help them determine if they are more interested in that. And if they're intrigued, then that cadet program is a good option for them to learn more about it. The trains is a great question. The city is divided in half district-wise by those tracks. So when people aren't assigned to other things, we hope that we can often keep people in both districts. And then we do know how to get around those trains when they block the city. It's just a longer route. And the federal government has a lot of power. We can complain about trains all we want, but at the end of the day, they're bigger than us and they move when they move. So we get to work around them more often than we would like to. But we try to keep people in those different districts so that we can get there as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
I think David had his hand up, and then Krista, I see you there next.
Hi, I had a question. Do y'all have body cameras, or is there a timeline, if not to get body cameras or anything about that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We have ordered body cameras, and we have equipment that is arriving slowly, trickling in. Some of it's a little bit late. We have signed an agreement that we intend to and hope to have it deployed by July 1st. And that's still our target and goal, assuming equipment arrives on time. Body worn cameras were requested. I think we had community that was interested in them, and as well as our police union was interested in them. So we started that process probably back around 6 months ago. It's probably when those discussions started. Motorola is the vendor that we've gone with. We feel pretty good about it. You can spend a lot of money on really, really incredible and expensive systems, but we found what we think is a great system for a reasonable price. And we have signed a 5-year contract for those and hope to have them deployed by July.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Krista.
First, thanks for taking some time to meet with us tonight. My question is that in the last couple of years, I've heard about programs that offer services to sort of replace police as first responders in terms of the public witnessing someone having a mental health crisis or struggling with substance abuse. And I know Milwaukee is such a small place that may not make sense to, in terms of implementing something like that here, but I am kind of curious as a police officer, your thoughts about having a program like that that would supplement or replace police as being first responders to some of those calls.
Yeah, that's a great question. We have looked a lot at that this past year, and there's some things that we're doing in the background. We are trying to develop, and we're optimistic about a position that would be a combination of a behavioral health position, as well as have some expertise related to issues involving homelessness. The struggle that we have, there are teams within the county that focus on behavioral health. The underlying safety factors is always a huge factor. If you're a social worker, you do want to be safe, and the details of those calls are going to dictate how safe you feel, and that might dictate whether it gets sent to a social worker or a police officer to respond. We also then partner with those teams so they can come with us if they're available. There's way too few of them. So for Clackamas County, there could be between 5 and 10 people in those types of positions that work for the entire county, where the Milwaukee Police Department has 33 police officers that work 24/7. So you can imagine how quickly 5 or 7 people would spread throughout the county 24/7. We often call them, but often they're not available. And if they are available, they're not coming from within the city. So the immediacy is a factor. If that crisis is happening now, someone may need to get there now. So law enforcement has been the default because they're the only 24/7 operation, especially in Clackamas County or in the city of Milwaukee. If you get into much bigger areas, they may have grown those resources faster and may have more to offer. But we recognize the need for it. And the county has been expanding those resources. Both the county itself as well as some of the individual cities have done what we're trying to do now, like Lake Oswego and the Oregon City Police Department now have employees that work for their cities who focus on behavioral health issues or crisis issues. Each of them just has one person. So again, that's not 24/7 coverage, but that person is dedicated to those cities. So they're going to get much better service than one of 5 employees that's spread out through the entire county. But in Lake Oswego's data, during like a 5-month period, their behavioral health worker went on about 90 different incidents where they contacted people. But of those 90 incidents, the behavioral health worker wanted police to be there with them for 80 of those. So it is, obviously, if you are a social worker, you get to decide what feels safe for you and what doesn't. There are people that handle issues on the phone and they help talk folks through issues on the phone. But when it comes to responding to crisis issues and just seeing the nature of the things we see and the volume, there is a real level of risk there. And that is one of the challenges, is what can you safely send a civilian social worker to, and who will take that job and also stay in it. They have a lot of attrition and turnover in those positions, especially the last 2 years. It's been very hard for them to stay staffed. So we really want to have someone that's on the city of Milwaukee payroll. I don't care if they're on my particular team or not, but if they're dedicated to our city and they're happy to work closely with our police officers, it would definitely result in ultimately much better service for the community than we can currently get just using the countywide services.
Thanks very much, Chief. Arlene?
Okay, Chief, I really appreciate your expansion of your capabilities into the mental health area that's so much needed. But I wanted to ask you, you mentioned the police union. Do you work with the same union as the Portland City Police do? And whether or not, how would you characterize your relationship with the union that you do work with?
Sure. We have our own union, so it's called the Milwaukee Police Employees Association, and it's strictly our own employees. There are several other agencies in the county that maybe they group 3 entities together to form one union, but ours is just us. I was a part of that union until I went into management. And as far as how I would characterize the relationship, I would say it's a good relationship, but it's also complicated. There's passionate people on both sides of those issues, and it's certainly their job to argue for what feels safe and right to them. And it's our job to argue for what we think is best for the city and the community. And oftentimes it's obvious and we agree on it. And sometimes it's more complicated. And we just work hard to talk through those issues the best we can. We generally maintain a productive relationship with them, and that's critical. I don't view that any different than it's just as critical for me to maintain a productive, healthy relationship with each one of you, even if there's something we disagree on. So I would characterize that relationship with our police union as the same. They're good people, and they feel the strain of this profession. They work very hard at it, and I think we're lucky to have the people that we do. With most unions, there is an executive board. So there's a board of like 5 people that hold positions like president, vice president, treasurer, and those people have a leadership role in that. That's who we work the most closely with. So they would be involved in, for example, contract negotiations. If we're evaluating the language of a specific policy or how we manage use of force, those are the 3 to 5 key people we would work closely with from the union. And of course, the rest of the city are all, other than management, are also union employees. They're just a different union than our police employee association. And if you have more or more specific questions about that, I'm happy to go deeper into that.
Thank you so much.
Looks like we've got another question from David, and just as a time check, we're sitting at about 6:52. So we are scheduled to go to break at 7. So we've got time for probably 1 or 2 more. David?
Yeah, thank you. If you encounter someone who doesn't speak English, how do you communicate with them? Like translators on the phone, or how does that work?
We'll use all available options. So we check to see if we do offer, for example, pay incentive for anyone that's bilingual with our department. And we do have people who are bilingual. So first we'll check to see if we have anyone on shift that can talk to the person. We also have a language line that we can use that ultimately will be able to communicate with anyone. So we can introduce a third party into that. And then there's a lot of certified bilingual and translators within the profession. So at any given time, although there might be 3 to 6 police officers working in the city of Milwaukee right now, there's probably several hundred currently on duty working in the Tri-County area. So if I put in a request to my dispatch center, they can immediately message 2 or 3 other dispatch centers and cover several hundred police officers to see what language options we currently have working in the county. And then depending on the type of call, if it's not a big deal, then anyone that's bilingual can help. If it's a really big deal, then we look at who are certified translators. And then we just evaluate if that's someone on duty or if we're going to use the language line or other translation services.
Thank you.
Emily? Oh, you got it.
Yeah, thanks. I was wondering, you talked about the BIPOC listening sessions that you had in the BIPOC review process, and I was just wondering if you could give any examples of like the types of things that ended up sort of coming up in those things, or like some of the specific changes that you made to the contract based on that feedback that you received.
Yeah, I guess a specific example I would give was the listening sessions were exactly that. We listened. And for the most part, we didn't really give responses unless someone specifically asked for it. So the idea was just to listen to people's experiences, and the city hired someone to manage that process. And then there were city staff that were directly involved in it. So myself, for example. And then we kind of collaborate to look at what our takeaways were. And certainly, obviously, a lot of that is just about people's different experiences. And what it feels like to be on the receiving end of any kind of police services. So we made a long list of all the questions that came up as a result of that. And we also worked to answer those questions. Some of those were just for ourselves internally, but then also making them available externally. But one specific example would be how people feel when they're being stopped by the police on a traffic stop, because that's obviously fairly common. And it's an issue that we work hard to manage. So listening to how different people feel We kind of custom tailored some training around those experiences, incorporated what we heard from those experiences, and especially for marginalized community members. And that training included BIPOC community members who talked about their specific experiences. And that was incorporated into training that was kind of around equity and customer service and professionalism, trying to minimize things that could really have a harmful impact on someone that might be completely unintentional and that we may be fairly unaware of the ways that it could be impacting people. So that's a specific example.
Thank you.
Does anybody have anything else? Looks like we might not. Stefan, do you have?
I got things I can toss in from, and the chief and I have had numerous conversations because he knows, I was in a position where I had different police departments report to me or where I had to work with them in different situations. And I'm always really glad to have Chief Strait here and just the nature of what he's presented tonight. I think anybody who's been in the class realizes, oh, here's a man who's very dedicated, who has gone to great lengths to gather data about this community and the work of the police here, and really cares about making it work here. And that's just all positive from my perspective. I had the I had the position, and Luke has heard me talk about this, where being a city manager in a city where the police department was a disaster. It was weekly news in the newspaper, some police officers getting arrested, doing ridiculous stuff, things like that. You don't read about that kind of stuff in the paper about the Milwaukee PD, and I'm really glad. That's not a question.
I appreciate the kind words. Despite this job and this title, obviously I'm also a normal person like everyone else. I've got a wife and a few daughters at home. And I have also been on the receiving end of police services, certainly. But I've been on the receiving end of it being who I am. So that's different for me than it is for other people. And the more we listen, obviously, the more we learn that. I'm lucky. I've been here for a long time, and we enjoy a lot of support from the community. And I have a lot of great people that work here, and they do work hard at it, but we're definitely not perfect. And there's mistakes that are made along the way. And we still enjoy a lot of support from the community. So it's been great to talk to you folks. I don't want to steal time from anyone else. I'm always available. If someone has questions, I will drop my email in the chat. I don't think it was added to that PowerPoint anywhere. And I'll also find that accreditation link and drop that in there. And I'm always happy to grab a cup of coffee with someone if they want to talk more.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Chief. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here. For everybody else, we are coming right up to 7 o'clock. So let's go ahead and round it up. We'll see you back here at 7:10 for engineering. Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Alrighty, folks, welcome back. We are back again, and as I was just saying, we are being joined by our city engineer, Mr. Steve Adams. Steve, thank you so much for being here. Please take it away.
Sure. Welcome, Dan. Yeah, glad to be back. This is my third year of presenting here in Milwaukee at the Leadership Academy. Previous to this job, I worked in Wilsonville. They also had a Leadership Academy there that I presented in for a few years. So as city engineer, busy job these days, lots going on in the city. Primarily, as the list shows here, I work with the Public Works Director. I meet with Peter once a week, and we discuss his crews, my crews, what we're looking at, possible problems, what to look for on CIP projects. I run a lot of questions by him on design. What does his staff want to maintain? What do they want to see done? So there's a pretty close collaboration between both of the departments. Personally, I help provide guidance and support to our civil engineers and our associate engineers. We have 2 of each right now. And they manage the design and construction of the city's capital improvement projects. Their lead person actually is my assistant city engineer, Jen Garbely. So she runs the design team, and I help Jen and her team. And then I also oversee all the private development that occurs within the city. I work over at the Johnson Creek building over in the far northeast corner of the city. Just beyond me is Portland, so about as far away from the city center as you can get. Also with me here are the engineering technicians who do the inspections, plan reviews, issue franchise utility permits, issue utility permits. They check and make sure all the construction is done correctly. The new infrastructure is tested and approved. And we finally go through the acceptance of all the utilities and all the infrastructure that gets installed with our capital and our private development projects. I also work a lot with the planning department. My background in Wilsonville was the capital projects, take that back, the private development engineering manager. And I handled all private development that occurred in Wilsonville for 15 years or so. And so I help in that role. You do a lot of help with the planning department. So a developer comes in, applicant, hey, I want to build this. What will it take? Planning has their part that they handle as far as whether it meets zoning and a myriad of other things that I barely follow, but the planners spend a lot of time at it. My part in private development is to determine what engineering upgrades need to happen. So a commercial development wants to come in, locate on this piece of land. The frontage isn't fully improved. We don't have curb gutter. We don't have sidewalks. We don't have landscape trees. I will require them to put all that in. Subdivisions will have to come in and put in whole new streets. Which means you got to put in water, storm, sanitary lines, and then construct the street and the curb gutter and the sidewalks and the landscaping and the street lights and the signage and the striping. So we put together requirements of what we want them to do in order to develop here in the city. We don't give anything away for free. Anybody new in the city has to pay their fair share of coming in and using what's already here and adding to it. But there's a lot of time spent lately in helping out the planning staff. And I have a couple dedicated members of my staff that work directly with them. And I coach and advise them and train them and then step in and provide some information when needed. Also, I work with creating the capital improvement plan. So we have dozens of capital projects that are identified in our various master plans that we rewrite about every 10 years and see kind of where we're at, what we've done, where we're going. And then we have a lot of capital projects. Then I work with Jen Garbely, my assistant city engineer. I work with Peter Passarelli, Public Works Director, and we start laying out a path as to how important these projects are and when do they get built and how the funding is and where the funding comes from, if we have enough money. And all that, the capital improvement plan is done every other year in even years. So we just wrapped up this year's. It's in draft form. There might be a few more changes, but basically it lays out a 5-year plan. What do we propose to build, to design, and then to build in each year? And it takes a tremendous amount of work to put it all together and to make sure the money's available to build everything that we want to build. And we're talking about a capital improvement plan that lately we've been spending close to $10 million a year on. Public construction is not cheap. The Linwood Avenue project is close to $4 million. The Lake Road project is upward in the high threes, or about 3.7, 3.8 million there. The 42nd, 43rd project that just got underway is about a $3 million project. So yeah, a lot of money is spent, and by state law, we bid a project out and we have to go with the low responsible bidder. So we'll typically get in 5 to 8 bids from various contractors, and from there we do choose the lowest responsible bidder, one who has the equipment and the knowledge to build the project correctly and still has the lowest bid of them all. But still very, very expensive. Along with supporting planning for the private development, I also work with them on drafting master plans. I also work with Peter Pasquarelli in Public Works, works with master plans too. So stormwater, water, sanitary are all primarily done through Peter, and engineering supports them in that. The transportation master plan, which is going to get underway this fall, is led by planning, and I provide support there on the engineering aspects of all the transportation. And this is vehicle, truck, transit, pedestrian, cycling, and there's sections in the plan that cover each of those, and we find out where our deficiencies are and where improvements are needed. And also once a month, I meet with the Public Safety Advisory Committee, and there's a group it's all 7 of our neighborhood district associations are represented, and there's a couple of extra people on there who help out, work out with that committee. And we discuss a lot of safety issues around the city, safety concerns. And I keep them up posted as to what's happening with the capital projects, what's happening with private development. And so 21-22, I'm fine. Go ahead, Dan, you're good. 21-22, a year in review. Again, as mentioned, the 2 main projects we got constructed was Linwood Avenue. That's the photo there on the left side of the screen. We added the 2 10-foot multi-use paths. We chose the multi-use paths on Linwood because it's a school. The Linwood Sojourner School is there. Linwood's an arterial that carries 7,000 to 8,000 vehicles a day. And we wanted to encourage kids to ride their bikes to school. Yeah, if we had kept the bike lane on the streets, I know the vast majority of parents wouldn't want their 8 or 10-year-old child riding a bike next to 7,000 or 8,000 cars going by a day. And so we purposely chose to pull the bike lane off the street and tie it to the sidewalk, specifically to encourage children to ride their bikes to school, and also parents who aren't comfortable with riding their bikes on a busy street, to encourage them to get out and ride their bikes also. Lake Road was the other major project we reconstructed this last year. It's the first street in the city that has a pervious asphalt top layer. So if you drive Lake Road on a heavy rain day, you'll notice that there's not much spray, there's not much water on the surface. It drains through the surface pretty fast. The main intersections at 23rd, 27th, and 34th Oatfield are regular impervious asphalt. I chose to put the regular asphalt in those intersections because the amount of buses and trucks turning. Buses and trucks have a really high wheel load, and they've been known to take a pervious asphalt and kind of shred it a bit. It's called raveling. And rather than take the chance of raveling the pervious asphalt in these main intersections, we did not install that. We did add bike lanes all the way down from 21st all the way out to the end of the project, where it connects to existing bike lanes. So you can ride bike up and down Lake Road all the way to throughout the city. We chose the double stripe, as you see in the picture in the lower right, to make it feel safer and be safer. So rather than a single 8-inch line, you have an 8 and a 4-inch black stripe, another 8. So it's to kind of give motorists additional visual cues and stay out of the bike lane. I'm still thinking I'm going back and putting white reflectors on the white paint so that you can see it at night, and that if you happen to drift in your car by not paying attention, that your wheels will hear a thump thump and you'll move back over into the auto lane. Price wise, I just couldn't afford to do the multi-use pass that we did on Linwood. This budget was already pretty high because we chose to rebuild the street because it was in need of rebuilding rather than just doing an overlay on it. So the budget was already pretty high on it, and we made the decision to leave the bike lanes on the street with Lake Road. And next slide, Dan. And this is what we're working on right now. If you're familiar, if you've been down 43rd or 42nd in the last 2 months, you'll see it's pretty well torn up. We hope to pave 42nd in the next couple of weeks, weather allowing. All the work, all the utility work on 42nd's been done. I think most of the sidewalks are poured now. The curbs are all in. So contractor came in and out, did 42nd pretty fast. We're now focused on getting House Street reconstructed and 43rd. And all that work should be done by this fall, maybe late summer. The look of the multi-use path you saw on Linwood will be the same style we use on the west side of 43rd, 10-foot wide path. We didn't have sufficient right-of-way to put two 10-foot wide paths. So on the east side of 43rd, we're going to go with a 6-foot, 5-foot sidewalk, the entire length of the east side. We just, again, we try to fit the projects within the amount of right-of-way we have. If we have to go out and buy right-of-way, it becomes quite expensive. Most right-of-way goes from $15 to $25 per square foot. So we try not to expend excess money on widening a street by acquiring right-of-way. The Homewoods Safe SSMP project, we have a bid on it. We have a contractor hired. They're not starting super fast. I think they're waiting for the weather to dry out and warm up a bit. But that one will be under construction here shortly. And we hope to get it done hopefully by the fall, but I think we gave them till like next spring. I put summer in 23, and that's a misprint. I shouldn't have put summer 23. It's probably winter or spring of 23 that we'll get the Homewood Safe SSMP work done. Projects that were under design, you can read there on down. Ardenwald North is a pretty good sized project occurring north of 32nd. Take it back, north of Roswell and west of 32nd. But that'll be under, it's in design right now. We will have a public open house likely in June, so people can see what our thoughts are. Harvey Street is under design right now. We have a questionnaire out right now on our Engage Milwaukee site and whatnot, asking our community members what they want to see on Harvey. We only have a 40-foot right of way on Harvey, so we have room for 2 travel lanes and 2 sidewalks on each side, one on each side, or we have room for 2 travel lanes, 1 sidewalk, and parallel parking. And we're basically trying to get the feel from the community and what they rather see done there. But that survey is open till I think early April. Winnow Street Greenway, this is a big project, and so far a very difficult project to pull together and get off the ground. So we have a lot of funding we received from it. We received some state dollars. We received some Metro Regional Flexible Fund dollars. It's called RAFA grant. And so we total money we received from others is about $5.5 million. But working with ODOT, everything's done a little differently and a little more time consuming. The first elements will be built by the private developer or the Monroe Apartments. We have an agreement with them that they'll build a 16-foot wide cycle track, which is 10 foot of bike lane and 6-foot sidewalk adjacent to it. and we'll pay them to build that when they build their apartment. So that first piece will likely be constructed this summer or fall. The other segments from 37th out to Linwood is an ODOT project. And with the regional flexible funds, the city's not allowed to spend them. We don't have the certifications to expend federal dollars. And so ODOT has to expend them. So we will work with ODOT in designing and constructing that project. Independently, ODOT is also redesigning the intersection of Monroe and 224. The full signal is going to be going away, and it's going to be replaced by a bike ped signal. Vehicles will no longer will be able to turn left off 224 onto Monroe, and vehicles will not allow to go across 224 from Monroe from one side to the other. They will be allowed to either access Monroe from 224 northbound right, southbound right, or to exit Monroe going northbound on 224 or going southbound on 224. But that's an ODOT project. We have a little bit of say in it, not much, but that's totally going to be managed by ODOT. And then we're going to have a third project that ties in Monroe Street to the ODOT improvements once we know what they're designing. And that's going to be a city managed project, and city will control design and construction of it. But yeah, at Monroe Greenway, it first got approved by council in 2015, I believe. And it's looking like we might get it constructed by 2025. So a long process here. And last slide, Dan. And I said we also work with private development projects. The two biggest ones we have right now, as I mentioned, Monroe Apartments at Monroe and 37th, 234 units. There's 4 3-story buildings and 1 5-story building there. And you can see they're making pretty good progress on the buildings. They also have permits to do street improvements, half street improvements adjacent to the site, both on half of Monroe and half of 37th will be rebuilt. They have that permit in hand. I imagine they'll start working on that once the weather again dries out and warms up. Henley Place is really close to going under construction. It is the replacement of Kellogg Bowl, and the picture here is a rendition of what the artist thinks it will look like when it's done. That's what's been approved by Planning Commission. 178 units, 6-story building, sitting back where the Milwaukee Bowl site, Kellogg Bowl, the Kellogg Bowl site on North Main Street is. We are virtually ready to issue the right-of-way permits. Not a lot of work for engineering in this one. This is primarily a building department project for inspection and construction. We also have a few smaller developments going on, 9-lot subdivision up near 33rd and Roswell that's been permitted to go. And another small subdivision at 56th and Railroad that we're waiting for them to mob. And a third small subdivision on 19th Street in Island Station called Elk Rock. And again, they are permitted, but they have yet to mobilize and do work on site. But anyway, and we have lots of other private development in various stages of going through Planning Commission or waiting for the developer to submit applications to build. I say right now we're well over a total of probably 1,200 housing units in various stages of approval or development. Anyway, that's what my Department of 10 do. And I am go back to full screen for people, Dan, and I'm back to open to answering any questions anybody may have.
Thanks very much, Steve. If anybody does have questions, please feel free to jump in. I know we kind of fell into me calling on people last time, which is fine, but just jump on in there.
Okay, I'm not going to let it sit too long. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Stephen.
way back in the days when you were a student at Humboldt State University, did you ever think, well, I think I want to be a city engineer sometime and have my hands in about 15 different projects and about $20 million worth of things all going on at once? Was that in the back of your mind somewhere?
No. The city engineer probably started entering my mind about 10 to 15 years ago.
Probably around the time I met you. I probably said, Steve, you ought to be a city engineer.
Maybe. Stefan and I worked together in Wilsonville. He was the jack of all trades. He was the planning director before I ever got there. Then he left. Then he came back as the community development assistant director.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. Then they decided that they were wasting his talents as the assistant director. And so he went from planning and managing community development to managing the transit system in Wilsonville. So he's a jack of all trades type guy.
I just kept raising my hand. So people must have questions.
Go ahead, Emily.
I just have a question. I live right on Harrison, next to the library.
Okay.
So Kellogg Bowl is right, a stone's throw from where I am. And the axle tree is a couple blocks away. And in last month's presentation, Joseph was showing plans for a new development right down on 99 and Washington.
That was a Coho project.
Yeah. So that's a lot of new units for downtown Milwaukee.
Yeah.
How-
Coho points 195 units just up the street that you may not have mentioned, right next to the railroad tracks on Washington. Planning Commission approved a 55 unit apartment complex there too.
So how quickly would we anticipate that those will all be full?
I don't know about full, but Henley Place, they want to have the building constructed by about March of 23. So about a year from now, they want to have that one completed. Coho probably, I don't know why, but Coho's been approved for a while, but they likely won't go under construction until spring of 23. So that'll be completed in roughly spring of 24. The Dogwood Station, which is the 55 unit building, I would hope to see plans submitted in the next couple months, and that one, again, should get under construction. That one should be completed by spring or summer of 23. The other big one I haven't mentioned that many people might know about is Hillside, which is the Clackamas County Housing Authority site on 32nd Avenue across from the hospital. Right now, it's a lot of smaller single-story buildings, all built at an angle to 32nd, kind of sits over there on the west-hand side. And there's a 7-story tower that's down the hill. That's all part of Hillside. Well, Clackamas County wants to make their land more efficient. So they already have approval in stages, in 7 phases, I think it is, to tear down the existing 100 small homes that sit there on that land, and they're going to come back in and build 500 apartments. This all got approved by Planning Commission probably about a year ago now, but it's being managed by Clackamas County Housing Authority, and that's mostly for low-income housing there. And I'm still waiting for the first permit submittal to come in, but that's probably the biggest project going on in the city once it gets going.
So some of these other projects, right, have, like the Coho project has, what, 20% is designated as low income housing?
10%.
10%? So the Hillside, that's going to be primarily low income housing?
Yes, because it's being managed by by the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. So that the whole purpose is to create a big block of low income housing. That's kind of my ideal site because 32nd Avenue has a pretty frequent TriMet line that goes down it. The buses go, it's a frequent run line, like every 20 minutes a bus goes down. And also it's a real close to for people to jump on the bus there, go down, take the Max line, the orange line downtown. And so it's actually a really nice location for that. And the hospital is right across the street. So.
And will the building that's going in where Kellogg Bowl is, does it have designated low-income unit?
It does not. The one unit, the 55 unit housing place, the Dogwood Station, though, they already have gotten acceptance for some grants and things to have it what they call workforce housing, which means the units will be priced at a rate that for someone making 80%, don't quote me, planners know more about this than I do. People making 80% of the is it the
area median income?
Yeah, that they will be priced for them to afford it. So it's called workforce housing, and that's the Dogwood Station, 55 units there on Washington in near 23rd.
If I could just tack on to Emily's question a little bit, do you have a sense with all these different projects that are going on or, are slated to come in the next few years, what kind of an actual dent that makes in the housing shortage that I hear about? I feel like that's sort of like the common phrase that gets tossed around. It's just like housing shortage, housing shortage. But what does that actually look like? And what does it actually take to put a real dent in that? And do these projects do that?
Hey Dan, has Laura talked already to the group planning manager?
She has. Yeah, Laura and Joseph were with us last month.
Okay. So Laura and Joseph actually are more closely aligned to the housing shortage and what it means. I kind of work with the street infrastructure and the water and utility infrastructure, make sure it works. So that's my role in it.
Sure.
Again, Milwaukee's around 20,000 people. We're adding some 1,200 housing units to it, which is pretty good size. I mean, if you figure what the average is, 1.5 or 1.8 people per unit, our population will go up 23 to 24,000. So it'll be a pretty good chunk, but it's really not my area.
Yeah, sorry for asking something that's a little bit out of the scope. A little bit of a squirrel from what Emily was asking about. Apologies.
Fair question, though.
Hey, I see Morgan with a hand up.
Yes. I was just wondering, I live pretty close to Harvey, and I was wondering how you guys go about when you're putting in new sidewalks, how you go about negotiating or communicating to the homeowners when you're sort of taking a strip of their property. Now, I understand that property probably already is belongs to you guys, but you can't help but grow your grass and maybe plant a tree. How's that process go?
Yeah, my whole career, there's been a common misunderstanding of what is private property and what is right of way. And there are some places in the city where literally 20 feet of what you're mowing and taking care of in your front yard is actually city right of way. But the good news is that you've been using that free of taxes for ever since you owned your house. You're not paying taxes on that piece of land. The problem is if the city ever needs to do something with it, it has actual legal right of way. So early stages in a project, we have open houses. We show kind of where the right of way limits are. We say, okay, the road is 26 feet of asphalt. This is in a 60-foot right of way. So go look at what 17 feet on either side of the asphalt, and that's probably the edge of right of way, close enough. So we start talking about it. I mention it to the NDAs when we meet with them, when we have open houses, and then we'll send out letters to all the homeowners along the frontage, and we'll let them know that this project is coming and that approximately so many feet of their front yard is right away, and we'll be putting a sidewalk in. Great that you'll have a new sidewalk to walk your kids and dogs on. However, if you have a prize rose bush or a roadie that you want to save, please dig it up and move it back to another spot in your yard, because when we get there, the contractor is just going to demolish everything. Or if you have a fence, you have a picket fence, you have some kind of fence that you love, please dig it up, move it back. We'll come out, help find the right-of-way corner for you, and we'll know pretty much where the extents of the projects are. But we encourage everyone to relocate whatever they don't want to lose somewhere into their yard before we'll go through and demolish it all.
Sounds thankless.
Yeah, many people do not like hearing that.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Rebecca.
Yeah, my question is kind of simple, although that last conversation makes me realize that the city of Milwaukee could have all my daffodils on the front if they wanted to come by and get them. But anyway, are any of these various multi-unit housing developments, apartments going up, are any of them have condominium elements, or are they all rental properties that you're talking about?
All the ones I'm talking about are rentals. We do have some application. Do we have any application for condos? I know with the middle housing, which I'm sure Laura's talked to you all about, with middle housing, once that gets approved and passed, the code language gets in, I really think a lot of developers are going to take advantage of it. And the middle housing could be individual ownership on a common parcel where you have an HOA kind of taking care of it. But no, everything I described right now, all 1,200 units in various stages of construction, I believe are all apartments. Okay. But we will have more smaller units coming likely. I anticipate a lot of smaller units coming.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
Any other questions? Topic? Stefan, anything?
You have another question if there's nobody else.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was wondering if you could, I'm a relatively new Milwaukee resident. We've only been here for a couple years now.
Okay.
And I keep hearing about this Milwaukee Greenway thing, but I don't actually have any idea what that means or looks like. Could you tell me, like, I know you're saying that there's still a design process going on, but what are some of the things that might entail? Like, what does a Greenway look like? What are we after?
What we're after is bike ped mobility on a straight and vehicle, and they all share the elements to a certain extent. So where Linwood has the multi-use pass completely removed off the road, with the Greenway, what we anticipate is building a single 7 or 8 foot wide sidewalk for pedestrians, and the road surface itself will become a sharrow. So speeds will be max 20 miles per hour. Bikes and vehicles are expected to share the road. Vehicles are expected to be polite to the bikes. The diverter that is installed at Monroe and Linwood is there primarily to try to lower the amount of vehicles traveling on Monroe. And so before I put the diverter in, vehicle counts were up in the low 2,000 vehicles per day, 2,200 vehicles per day. Now they're running probably 1,500 to 1,800 vehicles a day. So you want the vehicle count low enough that cyclists will feel comfortable taking that road. And that's primarily, that's our version of a Greenway. When the TSP, Transmission Systems Plan, gets rewritten starting this fall, I'm going to have a Greenway element added to the TSP. Right now, there is not one in there. But we'll have that added, and we'll probably have different versions of it too, depending on how fast people go, or not very fast, how many vehicles are on the street. We do have another Greenway low volume street that was first part of an Island Station Greenway project. That is a 20 foot wide asphalt street and has designated a 5 or 6 foot wide pedestrian path on one side of the street, and then a 14 to 15 foot wide vehicle sharrow on the other side. And so the design is such that vehicles can still go two ways, but when you have opposing traffic, one vehicle is expected to gently go over into the pedestrian way, let the other vehicle pass, and come back over into the other vehicle, the Sharrow vehicle path. We're looking to use that design more for our low volume streets that have typically less than, say, 300 vehicles a day. And right now we only have one street where it's been approved. That's 19th Avenue and just south of Sparrow. It's between Sparrow and what's the next one down, Wren or something like that. It's that first block that there's a Elk Rock subdivision coming in, and we had them design 19th to this Island Station Greenway, low volume Greenway design. It's also something that we are currently showing in the Ardwell North area. So a lot of the low volume streets there, Van Water, 31st, 30th, they will have that look of adding a pedestrian way onto the street. Sidewalks, curb and gutter are very expensive. They go for anywhere between $85 to $100 per linear foot to construct. And the council started getting concerned by how expensive many of our projects are. And so we talked about going with this, the Sharrow Green Street concept of everyone sharing the same 20-foot asphalt. They like the idea. They like the idea for slowing vehicles down, dedicating part of a roadway away from vehicles and make it more pet friendly. Of course, we have to hope that people will respect, there'll be an actual bright yellow 8-inch wide plastic laminate adhered to the road surface, and the pedestrian side will have additional little ped symbols with arrows indicating that pedestrians walk here. So hopefully vehicles will respect that. These are all in low volume streets, neighborhoods. Everyone driving by should be your neighbor or your neighbor's neighbor, and we're hoping that that this is a more cost-effective way of dedicating some pedestrian way on a lot of our local streets.
Awesome. Thanks.
Sure.
Steve, I feel a need to point out that back in the day, your position would have been probably referred to as I don't know, roads engineer, highway engineer, something like that. Somewhere along the line, somebody realized, wait a minute, it's not all about highways.
I've been here for a while.
Oh, no problem. I was just wondering, I'm double checking the building.
Yeah, yeah, okay, thanks.
Thanks.
You're still at work.
Excuse me, that was the janitor wondering what the heck am I still doing in my house? I'm not in Hawaii. I'm here at Johnson Creek.
Oh, yeah, I thought you were in Hawaii. I was just going to point out, though, that you are an avid bicyclist, and you bring a whole different perspective to the city engineer position than a whole lot of those people who just thought it was all about designing roads to move cars from point A to point B and nothing else mattered.
Yeah. Also, one other thing I didn't mention, I'm also a citizen member of the Clackamas County Pedestrian Bikeway Advisory Committee. So I meet with about 13 or 14 community members of Clackamas County once a month, and we discuss bike and ped mobility throughout the county, problem areas, and it gives me a chance to work with the Clackamas County planning staff that does bike routes and whatnot. So there's some working between the two groups there. One thing, if you don't know about it, I mentioned the Linwood Avenue. We finished our construction project, almost finished. There's still some things we're trying to work out there. Clackamas County has owns the road from Monroe up to Johnson Creek Boulevard. They have their own project that is going to go out to bid this spring and under construction this summer. They're going to continue that same look all the way up to Johnson Creek Boulevard, the 2 10-foot multi-use paths. So pretty soon, if you're a cyclist on that side of town, you can literally jump on the multi-use path right up to the Springwater Corridor, get on the Springwater Corridor, and never be on a city street. So that'll be kind of cool when Clackamas County gets that done. The Monroe Greenway, we're building it out to Linwood. Clackamas County is taking it from Linwood over to 205. and they are already at 30% design. They shared their design plans with me about a week or so ago. And so I have an idea of what they're planning on their greenway all the way out to 205. So pretty exciting times here with things changing.
I've got a question for you, Steve.
Sure.
I do.
What's-
I'm sorry, Arlene. I do want to say we're coming right up to
Yeah.
time. So this is the last question that we'll have time for this evening. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I wanted to ask about the capital improvement projects. A definition of what that means. Are those city government buildings that are being built? Or what are those?
Okay.
Thanks.
Capital improvement project is the code name that the city pays for everything. So the city provides the funds. We choose how to design it. We choose how to build it. We manage the contractor. We pay all the bills. So the various funds, as a homeowner here, you'll see a SAFE fund, an SSMP fund. There's some sewer fees. All those go into a general pot of money, and then there's a certain amount extra a year, couple million, that then become available for projects. There's also funds generated by new construction. So anybody new coming in, you have to pay into what we call a system development charge, which is kind of buying the infrastructure that's already here. So for a single family home, before you even buy the land or build or buy a single stick of wood, you pay some $21,000 to the city for the privilege of building a home here, and we're cheap. Wilsonville charges $45,000 just to get a housing permit in Wilsonville, so we're at about $21,000 here. Examples too: the Monroe Apartments, those 5 buildings, 234 units, they paid well over $5 million in SDCs for the privilege of building their apartments here in our city. So there's a lot of money to be had there. Those funds also come into our capital projects. So if we're widening a street, we're putting a bigger water line in, we're extending a sewer line somewhere, the SDCs add extra capacity to our system. And there's so much money per year, $1 million per year generated in SDCs, and those also go to help fund our capital projects. The other thing that funds our capital project I did not mention are grants. In the last 3-4 years, we've been able to acquire well over $5 million, almost $6 million in grants, and the grants help pay for our construction projects too.
So Steve, I heard Arlene's question a little differently. I thought maybe she was wondering about where these new large buildings are being built, whether any of those are city projects. And
no.
Yeah, right.
No,
And
they're not. The
only
buildings themselves, yeah, they're all privately owned. All we do, they will build infrastructure that we tell them we need to have, and then they give us the infrastructure. They give us the street sidewalks, the water lines, and all that. But they build the buildings. The only buildings the city owns are Johnson Creek, the library, City Hall, police, the police fire station building there. And soon the new City Hall, the Adventist building was the new City Hall. We own that one. But other than that, no, we don't own buildings in the city. We own street lights, signs, pipes, stuff like that.
Well, Stephen's right. I was on the wrong track with that, thinking that the city was planning on building some new buildings, but now I've got the idea. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Excellent.
Well, we're coming up to it here. Does anybody have aha moments for this evening?
Before we get to that, and I know everybody's rushing for them, but before we do, I do want to say thanks to Steve for being here with us. Thank you so much for your time. We'll have aha moments, but we really appreciate you taking the time out of a Wednesday to be here with us. And unlike the last meeting of yours that I was invited to, you didn't even bring a screaming baby. So
We thought your baby was very cute. Everyone felt very sad that you were split 2 ways that night, Dan.
We'll try better next time.
Bring
Ahas.
him back yearly. We'll see how he grows up. He'll be a walking toddler next year, Dan.
Yeah.
But anyways, if anyone ever has questions on construction projects or safety concerns with streets or sidewalks or bike lanes or whatever, feel free to reach out to me. I'm a lot like Luke's stuff there, but I'm Adams S at MilwaukeeOregon.gov. So just Adams S, and it'll find me. I'm also on the webpage, or you can email Dan, and Dan knows how to find me. He'll forward your email on to me too. So anyway, thank you. I appreciate this. I appreciate your interest in learning more about city government and how it all works. It's pretty amazing how little I knew when I came out of college and how much I had to learn on the job. They don't teach a lot of this stuff in college, I can tell you that. So it's great seeing y'all, and take care.
Thanks, Steve.
All right.
So
You got it. That's yours, sir.
hmm.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, I thought that was very fair. My aha moment was actually funny. Last month it was seeing the plan for the Coho building, and this month it's seeing the plan for the Henley building on North Main. I hadn't seen that before.
No, me neither.
Yeah. Anybody else?
My father was a public safety officer, and I have been talking to him about issues with police departments, et cetera, things that have come up in the news recently. And he said one of the things that the best police departments do is get to know the people in the community. So I appreciated all the ways that Luke Strait mentioned that police officers just make themselves available to talk to citizens of the city.
That's a really good point. I'm not sure it's sunk into people, but every single city presenter has made a point about, if you have questions or concerns, reach out to me. You can reach me online, or here's my phone number. That's pretty unusual. There are a lot of cities where they kind of guard the contact information for their department heads because they don't want lots of citizens to be calling them. Anyway, so it's something I appreciate.
It stood out to me, Stefan. But my aha moment tonight maybe isn't just so much about tonight, but it's like been building, which is just that, like, is this just your like Milwaukee propaganda program? Because I feel like every week it's just sort of like selling like, hey, like our local government is pretty awesome compared to like, oh, I don't know, all the other cities in the area.
Right.
Like, it just seems like everyone we hear from is so engaged in their job and cares so much about what they're doing and is taking the city in like these very productive, progressive ways. Yeah, every week I just feel like that's very cool and that's very cool. And I feel better about that knowing that now. And like, yeah, that's been building. But I felt that again tonight as we were listening to the chief speaking and whatnot. I was like, okay, I can feel pretty good about all of that, which I don't think a lot of people get to say about the city that they're living in.
Yep. Well, I think we're done, Dan.
I think we are. Folks, this is the second to last class. We are coming back together one more time this year, and it's going to be on April 23rd, which is a Wednesday. I'm sorry, April 20th. Goodness, April 20th. 20th.
You're
My
always
goodness.
testing me, Dan, just to see
well,
if I'm paying attention.
Hey, listen, we caught each other on that one. April 20th, which is different from what I said at the beginning of this. So I'm going to go back in time and correct that. April 20th, that Wednesday. And it is going to be a hybrid meeting. Like I said, more information to come about that. But as always, thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here.
All right.
Have a good night. Be safe. See you in a month.
Bye.